Rain hammered against the windshield as I eased my car toward the corner of Ninth and Alder, the wipers struggling to keep up with the storm. The streets were nearly empty at this hour, just reflections of streetlights trembling on the wet pavement and the soft hum of the engine filling the silence in the car. Noah slept in the back seat, arms wrapped around the stuffed tiger he never went anywhere without. I was thinking about getting home, about the quiet house waiting for us, when something slammed against my window. I hit the brakes. A small face appeared through the blur of rain. A little girl, soaked, shivering, eyes wide with terror. Before I could react, she raised both hands and pressed them flat against the glass. Her lips trembled. Her breath came out in sharp clouds. She whispered through the crack I lowered in the window, "Sir, Mommy cannot go." For a second I thought I heard her wrong, but the urgency in her trembling voice was unmistakable. She grabbed my sleeve with fingers so cold they felt like ice. "Please, come! Mommy needs help!" My heart kicked hard against my ribs. I told Noah to stay buckled, then stepped out into the storm. The rain was relentless, soaking through my shirt in seconds, numbing my skin. The little girl tugged at my hand and led me toward a narrow alley behind the closed laundromat. The deeper we went, the darker the world became, the only light coming from a flickering bulb high on a brick wall. That was when I saw her. A woman slumped against the wet bricks, her head bowed, her hair dripping down her shoulders like a curtain of gold tarnished by rain. Her arm hung limp at her side. Her breathing was shallow. She was conscious, but barely. "Mommy!" The little girl fell to her knees, touching the woman's cheek. "Please wake up." I knelt beside the woman and pushed her hair gently off her face. That was the moment the shock hit me like a second wave of thunder. I recognized her. Just 10 hours earlier, she had stood in a crowded conference room full of reporters and publicly challenged me about the failures in our temporary worker policies. She had looked at me with fierce conviction that morning, and now she could barely keep her eyes open. Her lips parted. The faintest whisper escaped. She tried to walk. Fell. I picked up my phone with shaking hands and called emergency services. While I spoke, the little girl clung to her mother's coat, crying quietly. "I am Eva," she said between sobs. "She did not eat today. She worked all day. Please help her." I reached for the woman again, steadying her head. "Can you hear me? You are safe now." Her eyelids fluttered. She gave the smallest nod. Then her gaze shifted to her daughter. "Take her. Keep her warm." She exhaled hard, as if every remaining ounce of strength was leaving her body. "I will not leave either of you," I said, surprising myself with the firmness of my voice. The ambulance arrived within minutes, its lights cutting through the rain like a lifeline. Paramedics lifted her gently onto the stretcher, while I held Eva, trying to shield her from the storm. She buried her face in my shoulder. Her tiny body trembled. Her fear was so real, so raw, it pierced straight through me. One of the paramedics shouted over the rain, "She is severely dehydrated and exhausted. We need to move." I followed them to the ambulance, still holding Eva close. Then the paramedic paused and looked at me. "Sir, is this your wife?" I shook my head. "No." "But do you know her?" The question landed heavier than I expected. This morning, I thought I knew exactly who she was. A critic. A challenger, a woman unafraid to stand up to a CEO in front of cameras. Now I realized I knew nothing at all, only that she had fought far harder than anyone should have to fight alone, and she had lost today. "No, I do not know her," I answered quietly, "but I am not leaving her." He nodded and motioned for me to climb inside with the child. Ava held my collar with both hands, as if letting go might make everything worse. Rain pounded against the metal roof as the ambulance pulled away from the alley. I looked down at the child in my arms, at the fear in her eyes, at the trust she had no choice but to give me. The woman on the stretcher needed help. The little girl needed safety. And for reasons I could not explain yet, it already felt like both of them were pulling me out of a darkness I had been pretending I was not living in. I thought I was helping them tonight. I had no idea they were about to save me instead. The ambulance doors swung open under the buzzing hospital lights, and the sudden brightness felt jarring after the storm. I stepped out, carrying little Eva, her soaked dress clinging to my shirt as she shivered against me. Nurses rushed toward the stretcher, guiding the unconscious woman into a curtained room, while I stayed behind with the child pressed to my chest. A nurse with tired eyes and a calm voice approached us, offering a warm blanket. "Let's get her dry first." "What is your name, sweetheart?" Eva whispered her answer, barely audible, then burrowed deeper into me. The nurse turned to me next. "Are you the emergency contact?" I opened my mouth ready to explain, but the words tangled. "No, I found them in the rain. Her mother could not walk." The nurse nodded, already understanding too much. "Happens more often than you think. People hide how tired they are until their bodies give out." She motioned for me to follow her into a quieter unit where she wrapped Eva in a thicker blanket and handed her a small stuffed elephant from a donation box. Ava clutched it as if she had never owned anything soft before, while the nurse worked another entered with a clipboard. "Sir, CPS has been notified since there is a minor involved and the parent is currently incapacitated. It is standard procedure." I stiffened instinctively, holding Eva tighter. She felt it too, clinging to me with sudden panic. "No, I stay with Mommy. CPS will not take her away unless the mother is unable to care for her long term. We just need to document the situation." I exhaled slowly and nodded. It made sense. It still made my chest tighten. A doctor finally approached with an update. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, malnutrition, borderline hypothermia. She has been running on little to no rest for days, maybe weeks. I rubbed the bridge of my nose. Earlier that day, she had stood across from me in a conference room, fierce and articulate. Now, hours later, she was barely surviving. "When can she be discharged?" I asked. The doctor's expression softened as if he saw something in my face I had not meant to reveal. "She needs a minimum of 24 hours of supervised rest. No stress, no physical exertion, stable environment. If she leaves alone with the child tonight, she will collapse again." The nurse beside him crossed her arms, staring directly at me. "Do you have a safe place for them to stay?" I hesitated. "I have a guest house. Warm, clean, space." She nodded once. "That is the safest option for her daughter tonight." Eva's small voice rose again. "Mommy can stay with you." I crouched to her level. "Only if your mommy says yes, sweetheart." The curtain to her mother's room rustled. She was awake, pale, eyes half open. I walked inside with Eva gripping my finger. Her gaze met mine, confused at first, then remembering the alley. She struggled to sit up, gasping softly. "You brought her here. Thank you." Her voice was thin, scraped raw from weather and exhaustion. She reached for her daughter, and Eva scrambled onto the bed, resting carefully against her mother's shoulder. The doctor explained the situation again. She listened, swallowing hard at every detail. When he mentioned she could not care for Eva tonight without help, shame flickered across her face. "I can do it. I can try." Her voice broke. "No, you cannot," the doctor said gently. "You need rest. Real rest." Tears filled her eyes. She looked down at her daughter, then at me. "I am sorry you got dragged into this." I raised a hand. "You did not drag me anywhere. You both needed help." "That is enough." The nurse stepped forward. He offered a guest house. Stable environment. Private. Safe for the child. The woman closed her eyes as if trying not to cry. "I do not want charity." "It is not charity." I said the words quietly. "It is responsibility. You collapsed in an alley carrying burdens you should never have had to carry alone, and your daughter should not spend the night in a hospital waiting room." For a long moment, she said nothing. Only the rain tapping faintly against the window filled the silence. Finally, she whispered, "One night. Just one." Something in her voice told me she had not said yes to help in a very long time. Later, after the paperwork was completed, after CPS documented that the mother had consented to the temporary arrangement, I carried Eva as we followed a nurse escorting her mother out in a wheelchair. When we stepped outside, the rain had softened to a mist. The storm was letting go. On the drive to my home, Eva slept against her mother's lap. Her mother leaned her head back, eyelids fluttering, fighting to stay awake out of fear of appearing weak. "You can sleep," I said softly. "You are safe." Her eyes opened a little. Why are you doing this? I stared at the road ahead. Because someone should have helped you long before tonight. She drew in a shaky breath but did not reply. When we arrived, I led them to the guest house. Warm lights glowed from inside. The air smelled faintly of cedar and linen. I handed her a set of soft clothes and fresh towels. Eva explored timidly, touching the blankets, the lamp switch, the arm of the couch, as if all of it were too gentle to belong to her. The woman stood there holding the towels, overwhelmed. This is too much. It is one night, I reminded her. A safe night. Eva climbed onto the bed, curling up with the stuffed elephant the nurse had given her. Her mother watched her, something fragile in her expression. She lowered herself onto the chair beside the bed and whispered, "Thank you. No one has helped us like this before." Her voice cracked. I swallowed hard. "You do not need to thank me." She looked up, eyes shimmering in the low lamplight. "But I do. Because you treated us like we mattered. And for a moment, I was not the CEO who had lost his family years ago. I was simply a man realizing that maybe kindness was the one thing I had forgotten how to give. But tonight, it came back to me, and it felt like breathing again. Morning light filtered through the window of the guest house, soft and gold, warming the edges of the room. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the rise and fall of Eva's breathing as she slept curled beneath the blanket. Her mother, Sienna, slept in the chair beside her, her head resting awkwardly on her arm, as if she had been afraid to lie down fully. She looked nothing like the woman who had stood fearlessly across from me just hours earlier in a crowded auditorium, calling out my company policies with a steady voice and unbreakable gaze. Yet the two women were the same. One bold enough to speak truth in a room full of executives, the other too tired to hold her head up. I stepped inside quietly. I did not want to wake them, but as I placed a small tray on the table, the faint clink of a mug stirred Sienna awake. She blinked rapidly, disoriented at first, then her eyes widened with panic. She sat up too quickly and winced as her muscles protested. "Where is she?" Her voice cracked. I nodded toward the bed. She followed my gaze and exhaled, her whole body sinking in relief. She reached out and brushed her daughter's hair away from her forehead, whispering something soft. When she turned back to me, her expression was guarded. "I should leave soon. You and your daughter need rest more than you need pride," I replied gently. She stiffened, but she did not argue. After a moment, she added quietly, "I did not mean to cause trouble for you. You already have a reputation to protect." I almost laughed at how absurd it sounded. Reputation was the last thing on my mind when I carried her unconscious body out of the rain. I motioned toward the breakfast tray. "Eat something. You need strength." She hesitated, then nodded with a kind of reluctant surrender. Eva woke moments later with a small, sleepy cry, and Sienna lifted her onto her lap. The little girl looked at the pancakes on the tray, then at me, unsure. I smiled. "They are for you." She looked at her mother for approval, then reached for a piece with her tiny hand. For the first time since the night before, Sienna smiled. It was faint, tired, but real. I left them to eat while I stepped outside to take a call from my office. The second I answered, my assistant exploded. "Ethan, are you all right?" The board is furious. The press conference footage has resurfaced and everyone is talking. I rubbed my forehead. "Not now, Claire. Can it wait?" "Not really, but I suppose it will have to." She paused. "Is it true you canceled your morning meeting because you brought someone to the hospital?" I hesitated. Answering yes felt complicated. She sighed. "Ethan, you are the CEO. You cannot disappear without warning." There was no judgment in her voice, only concern. "I will be in later today." That was all I could promise. When I returned to the guest house, I found Eva sitting on the floor beside Noah's old wooden train set. She pushed the little engine along the track, mumbling sound effects. Noah had not touched that toy since my wife passed. It felt strangely symbolic to see it in use again. Sienna stood at the counter trying to wash the dishes despite being unsteady on her feet. "You do not have to do that," I told her. She flinched in embarrassment. "I cannot just sit here taking from you. It feels wrong." I moved closer. "It is just breakfast, Sienna. It is not a debt." Her throat worked as if she wanted to argue, then her shoulders lowered in quiet defeat. She dried her hands and joined Eva on the floor. The sight of the two of them in my home stirred something I could not explain. Noah wandered in from the hallway, still in pajamas, hair sticking out wildly. He stopped abruptly when he saw the unfamiliar child. Eva held the wooden train up to him. "Wanna play?" Noah blinked, then nodded slowly. The moment was so small, yet so monumental. I watched as the two children sat cross-legged building tracks and crashing trains with the dramatic enthusiasm only children possess. A soft laugh slipped from Sienna. She had been so tense, so afraid. But watching her daughter find joy in something as simple as a toy seemed to loosen something inside her. Suddenly, her phone vibrated on the counter. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and her face drained of color. "What is it?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "My job. They let me go. Yesterday when I collapsed." I closed my eyes briefly. Of course they did. Survival had never been fair to people like her. She laughed, but it broke halfway through. "I cannot even be dependable long enough to keep a paycheck." I stepped closer. "Losing consciousness is not a failure." Her voice rose. "It is when being conscious is the only way you can feed your child." Eva looked up, startled. I crouched beside her. "You are safe here. Just breathe." Sienna pressed her palms to her face. When she finally lowered them, she whispered, "I do not know what to do now." I nodded in understanding because I recognized the feeling all too well, the sense of standing on a cliff's edge with no direction. For her, it was daily reality. For me, it had only appeared after I lost my wife. "You do not have to decide everything today," I told her. "Just rest. Let today be enough." Her eyes shimmered again, but this time with something gentler than fear. I stepped out to take another call. When I looked back through the window, I saw Sienna sitting on the floor with Eva curled against her. Noah leaned his head on Sienna's shoulder as though he had known her forever, and for the first time since my wife died, the house looked like a home again. That realization settled deep inside me with surprising warmth. I had saved them from the rain. I had not expected they might be saving me too. I never planned to become responsible for another child overnight, not after spending years convincing myself that raising Noah alone was already more than I could manage. Yet that is exactly what happened the morning I found Eva sitting in my kitchen, wearing Noah's old dinosaur pajamas, swinging her legs against the chair while eating cereal as though she had lived there her whole life. Sienna hovered behind her, still exhausted, still pale, but trying to smile as if she did not want to impose. "You can sit," I told her. "You do not need to stand guard." She shook her head softly. "She eats better when I stay near." I glanced at her trembling hands and motioned to the chair anyway. She hesitated before she finally lowered herself, every movement slow with fatigue. As I packed Noah's lunch for school, he ran into the kitchen, grabbed Eva's hand, and said, "Come play after breakfast." His openness stunned me. He had guarded his world tightly since losing his mother, but something about Eva broke through the walls he had built. I dropped him off at school, then rushed to 3 back-to-back meetings that I barely heard a word of because every few minutes my mind wandered back home. Claire pulled me aside. "You look distracted and unwell." I rubbed my face. "I did not sleep much." She raised an eyebrow. "That is obvious. You never miss details. Today, you missed 5. I sighed. "I will be better after today." She studied me, then softened. "If something is going on, you do not have to tell me what it is, but at least let me help manage the office chaos until you get your footing." I managed a grateful smile. Anyone else might have questioned me, tried to extract gossip or assumptions, but Claire had always known that silence was the only reason I could breathe some days. When I returned home, I found the guest house empty. Panic flared in my chest until I noticed movement in the yard. Sienna knelt on the patio steps with Eva leaning against her, both of them watching Noah gently roll a soccer ball. When Eva tried to kick it back, her foot barely lifted, wobbling, but Noah steadied her. That simple gesture, the gentleness in his hands, nearly broke me. I sat beside Sienna. "You should be inside resting." She gave a tired laugh. "I have been resting for days. My body is restless. My life has been nothing but surviving lately." She paused as if embarrassed. "Also, I am trying to understand your son. He is very patient. He takes after his mother," I said quietly. The air shifted. She grew still. "I am sorry," she whispered. I nodded, not wanting to linger in old wounds. Hours later, after the children fell asleep on a blanket in the living room, Sienna attempted to clean, insisting that she had to repay my help. But the moment she stood, she swayed. I caught her arm and guided her to the sofa. "You are done for the night." She looked away in shame. "I am not used to being taken care of." Then she whispered something I almost missed, "especially by men." I sat beside her but kept distance so she would not feel cornered. "You do not owe me anything. Not work, not gratitude, not repayment." She frowned. "But I should contribute." "You will. When you are healthy." She covered her face. "I feel like I am failing at everything. I cannot even stay awake long enough to mother my own child." I shook my head. "Exhaustion is not failure. It is the body's signal that you have carried too much for too long." Her voice wavered. "Then why does it feel like weakness?" "Because this world punishes tired women," I said softly. "Not because they deserve punishment." Her eyes filled and she looked away quickly. When I went to bed that night, I thought the hardest part was over. I was wrong. At 2 in the morning, I woke to the sound of coughing. Fierce, tiny, panicked coughing. I ran down the hall to find Eva, flushed, warm eyes watery as she clutched her chest. Sienna bolted upright, terrified. "She was fine earlier," she cried. Eva whimpered, reaching for her mother, but her breathing sounded thick, uneven. I took charge because Sienna was shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. "It is okay. Kids get fevers at night. We will get through it." I helped them to the bathroom for steam, placed a cool cloth on the girl's forehead, checked for labored breathing, watched for anything that crossed the line into emergency. But there was a moment when her breathing hitched and her little hands tightened around my sleeve, and something deep within me snapped wide open. I had failed before. I had failed to save my wife. I would not fail again. After an hour, the fever lowered. Eva curled into her mother's chest and fell asleep. Sienna sagged with relief. "How did you know what to do?" I hesitated. "My wife died of a sudden illness. Not the same as this, but enough that I learned every warning sign, every emergency step." She looked at me with something like sorrow. "I am sorry." I nodded. "Me too." She exhaled shakily. "I do not know how you do it. You treat my daughter like she is your own." The truth was simple. In those frantic minutes, she felt like she was. When I walked back to my room, the fear still lingered in my chest, but it burned with something else too, something steadier. I had made mistakes that night. I had fumbled with the thermometer, misjudged the steam, dropped the cold cloth twice. I was rusty, imperfect, but I had done the one thing that mattered. I stayed. The next morning, Sienna rested her hand lightly on my forearm. "Thank you, Ethan. Not for the house, not for the hospital bill, but for last night." My heart caught because I realized I had been waiting for someone to say that to me for a very long time. I became a father overnight again, and for once I did not feel afraid of the title. The morning after Eva's fever scare, the house felt strangely quiet, as though everyone was holding their breath. I left early for the office, partly because I had meetings stacked back to back, but mostly because something had been bothering me since the hospital. Sienna never should have collapsed like that. Exhaustion alone was not enough to explain the level of dehydration stress and malnutrition she had shown. Something else had pushed her over the edge, and for the first time, I wondered if I had missed something important. When I walked into my office, Claire was already waiting at my desk with her tablet, her expression tight. "We need to talk," she said. That tone never meant anything good. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. She tapped the screen. "I found something last night while clearing your flagged inbox." The folder was labeled Employee Hardship Requests, a section I rarely checked personally because it was supposed to be handled by the Worker Support Division. I assumed the system escalated urgent cases automatically. I was wrong. The email at the top was from 3 months ago. It was from Sienna. My stomach twisted as I read her words. She explained her situation carefully and without drama. She requested temporary emergency childcare assistance and medical coverage because her hours had been reduced without notice, leaving her unable to maintain basic needs for her daughter. She wrote that she was not asking for charity. She only needed time to stabilize. The request had been denied, not by policy, not by the system, By a single person. My jaw clenched as I read the name. Marcus Vell, a middle manager who had been reprimanded twice for misusing funds and gatekeeping benefits. He had blocked her email marked it non-essential and rerouted it to a spam folder. Claire swallowed. Ethan, this is not the first one. She opened another, then another. 6 in total, all from employees like Sienna. All dismissed. All marked as resolved, even though none of them had been addressed. My hands curled into fists. She collapsed because she was holding her life together alone while the system I built shut the door in her face. Rage burned through my chest. Not at Sienna, not at myself, but at the people who thought their power gave them the right to decide who deserved help. Call a full department review, I ordered. Every file, every request, every rejection. Bring them all. Claire nodded and moved quickly. Within an hour, the conference room was filled with documents and nervous staff members. Marcus sat at the end of the table, arms folded, face pale. Ethan, this is a misunderstanding, he began. I slammed Sienna's printed email onto the table. Explain this, he stuttered. She met the criteria, but her attendance was unstable. She worked 2 jobs, I snapped. She missed a shift because her child had pneumonia. That is not instability. That is survival. He tried again. The fund is limited. I had to prioritize higher performing staff. My voice dropped into the coldest tone I possessed. So you penalized struggling parents and rewarded privileged employees who did not need assistance. He looked away. That was enough for me. Effective immediately, you are terminated. His mouth fell open, but I had already moved on. I turned to the rest of the staff. This department exists to support people, not crush them. Anyone who has participated in this abuse should leave with him. No one moved. Good. Then we rebuild this system from the ground up. For the first time in years, something inside me shifted. I had always believed in leading with logic, not emotion. But Sienna's suffering had exposed something fundamentally broken in my company, and that was my responsibility to repair. After the meeting, I stepped into my office and sat heavily in my chair, reading her email once more. The humility in her words cut deeper than any accusation. She had begged for help in the most respectful way, and we had ignored her. I had ignored her. I rested my forehead in my hands. No wonder she fainted in that alley. No wonder she worked herself into collapse. She had been fighting alone because the world kept telling her she was undeserving of support. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Claire stepped inside, closing the door. Ethan, I need to tell you something else. I braced myself again. Sienna is terrified you will see her as a problem. She thinks asking for anything makes her a burden. I shook my head. She did everything right. She followed every rule. We failed her. Claire sighed. She also believes your kindness is temporary. She has been left behind before. You may have to prove you are not one more person who will. Those words hit harder than I expected. When I returned home, Noah ran down the hallway to greet me, but behind him, Sienna stood still near the counter, folding the same towel in her hands over and over. She looked anxious, as though waiting for bad news. Hey, I said gently. Everything all right? She bit her lip. I think we should leave by the end of the week. My chest tightened. Why? We have already stayed longer than we should. I do not want to cause trouble for you. I stepped closer. Sienna, you were denied help you were supposed to receive. You did nothing wrong. She blinked hard. I am tired of being the reason things fall apart. I shook my head. You are the reason things are finally being fixed. She looked up, startled. I told her everything, not the details that would embarrass her, just the truth, the oversight, the termination, the audit. Her eyes filled instantly. I covered her trembling hand with mine. You were never the problem. The problem was a system that forgot people like you exist. She whispered, Why are you helping me this much? I swallowed. Because someone should have helped you long before I showed up, and because you deserve more than survival. For the first time since meeting her, she let herself breathe deeply, shoulders loosening, eyes softening. And as I looked at her standing there in my kitchen, holding on to hope as if afraid it might disappear again, I realized something simple and terrifying. It was not just my company that needed rebuilding. It was me. The first headline appeared less than 24 hours after I fired Marcus, and it hit like a punch to the ribs. Billionaire CEO caught leaving hospital with mystery woman and child. The photo was grainy, taken in the rain, but unmistakably me. Eva's small head rested against my shoulder, her hair damp from the storm, and Sienna walked beside us wrapped in the emergency blanket. The angle made it look intimate, scandalous, like an affair being smuggled into the night. I stared at the article in disbelief as my phone buzzed nonstop. When the second headline dropped, the narrative shifted from curiosity to accusation. CEO funds secret. Stay for struggling single mother. I read the comments until my hands trembled. Must be his mistress. Another wrote, "These rich men always have backup families." Someone else added, "Why is she living in his guest house, huh?" It spiraled fast. A short video surfaced, next a nurse handing me the blanket for Eva, framing it as a romantic gesture. Then another clip of me paying the hospital bill. People wrote their own storylines. None of them were true. By midday, investors demanded explanations. By 3, the board called an emergency meeting. By 5, camera crews lined the sidewalks outside my building. I never imagined that helping a woman in crisis would turn into a public trial, but that is the danger of visibility in America. You are not allowed to be complicated. You are not allowed to be human. When I arrived home that evening, Sienna stood at the kitchen counter, clutching her phone with both hands. Her eyes looked hollow. People from my old job saw the articles, she whispered. They sent me screenshots. My heart sank. "Sienna, none of this is your fault." She shook her head violently. "I have ruined everything for you. You are being destroyed online because of me." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "No one is being destroyed. The media just needed a story," she whispered. "But they chose us. And I do not know how to survive being looked at like that." I wanted to tell her it would pass. I wanted to tell her the world forgets scandals quickly. But the truth was uglier. The world forgets rich men's scandals. Women like her get devoured. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her at the counter trembling, trying to disappear inside her own skin. The next morning, everything escalated. A reporter cornered one of my employees as she got into her car. "Do you know anything about the woman living with Mr. Hayes?" Another reporter approached Noah at school, drop off. Noah, who was 7 years old, whose entire world had already been shaken once when his mother died. I shoved myself between them and barked, "Do not ever speak to my son again." They backed away but kept filming. My hands shook all the way back to my car. I realized then that silence would not save us. If I said nothing, the world would decide the narrative for me. So, I made a decision. I walked into the office, gathered my executive team, and said, "I am holding a press conference." The room erupted. "Ethan, that is reckless. Ethan, the board will revolt. Ethan, this could ruin your career." I let them finish. Then I said the only thing I knew for sure. If I do not speak, they will tear her apart, and I will not let that happen. At noon, I stepped onto the platform outside the headquarters. Flashes went off, instantly blinding. A sea of microphones pointed at me. Reporters shouted over one another. "Is she your partner? Is the child yours? Are you supporting a mistress with company funds?" I lifted my hand. The noise died. I spoke clearly, carefully, without shame. 3 days ago, I found a woman and her daughter in crisis. They were in danger. They were sick. They had nowhere safe to go. I paused as cameras clicked like rapid fire. I chose to help them because it was the right thing to do, not because of scandalous assumptions you have written, not because of any secret relationship, because that is what decent people do when they find someone suffering. A few reporters shifted uneasily. I continued. "Her name is Sienna Morales. She is a single mother who has been working herself to collapse just to keep her daughter fed. She applied to our hardship program months ago, and someone in my company intentionally blocked her request. That is a failure of leadership. My leadership. And I am fixing it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I glanced down at my hands, then back up. "And one more thing." I leaned into the microphone. "I will not apologize for caring about a child who needed warmth and safety. I will not apologize for helping a woman who deserved compassion long before I met her. I stepped back. That is all. The questions erupted again, but I walked away. When I reached my office, Claire was standing there with tears in her eyes. That she said was the first honest thing this company has seen in years. Later that evening, I returned home unsure what I would find. Sienna sat on the couch, head down, phone buzzing beside her. She said nothing when I entered. I sat across from her. "It will calm down in a few days." She shook her head. "No, I cannot stay here. You have to think about your son, your company, yourself." She looked like she was trying to hold herself together with threads. I whispered, "Sienna, none of this makes me regret helping you. Not one moment." Her voice cracked. "You do not understand. I never wanted my name in the news. I never wanted to be the reason you lose anything." I reached for her hands. She pulled them away gently. "You deserve someone uncomplicated, not someone like me." Before I could argue, she stood and walked toward the guest house. I watched her go with a sinking in my chest I had not felt since the night I lost my wife. Helping them had started as instinct. Protecting them had become necessity. Losing them again now felt unbearable. That night, long after the house had gone quiet, I sat alone in the living room and stared at the doorway she had disappeared through hours earlier. For the first time, I realized something I had not admitted even to myself. I was not protecting them anymore. I was holding on because a world without them felt empty in a way I no longer wanted to survive. I found her 2 days later, but not because she reached out, not because she trusted me. I found her because the guest house was empty when I woke up, the bed neatly made, the small stuffed fox of Eva's placed in the center like a goodbye. She had packed quickly, while the world still slept, leaving nothing behind except silence. Noah wandered through the house calling for Mia until his voice cracked. I searched the property, the street, the places she might have gone, but there was nothing. No message, no explanation, just absence. It stunned me how heavy absence could feel when only 3 days earlier she had been a stranger. It took Claire to trace her. She found the lead through a referral line used by shelters and crisis programs. "There's a chance she went here," she said softly, handing me an address near the edge of town. She didn't open a file. Someone matching her description just showed up asking for temporary placement. I was already grabbing my keys before she finished speaking. The women's shelter sat behind a church built of aging brick and surrounded by bare winter trees. A faded sign near the door read "Safe Haven." I walked inside, slowly aware that men were rarely allowed in without permission. A staff member stepped forward. "Sir, can I help you?" I swallowed hard. "I'm looking for a woman named Sienna. She has a little girl, Eva. I believe they're staying here." The woman studied me carefully, measuring whether I was a danger or a lifeline. "And you are?" "Someone who shouldn't have let her walk away," I said quietly. Something in my voice must have landed because she nodded and gestured for me to follow. She led me to a small playroom where the walls were painted with faded murals of butterflies and flowers. A few donated toys were scattered across the rug. And there she was, Eva, sitting cross-legged on the floor, turning the stuffed fox over in her hands as if trying to decide whether it still belonged to her. When she looked up and saw me, her entire face lit. "Mr. Ethan." The word burst out of her like joy she could not hold. She ran straight into my arms. I lifted her, swallowing the emotion that surged through me. "I missed you too," I whispered. A soft gasp sounded behind us. I turned. Sienna stood in the doorway, hair pulled tightly back, wearing a coat far too thin for winter. Her eyes widened as though she'd been struck. She didn't move. She didn't smile. She didn't even breathe. She only whispered one thing so quietly it felt like breaking glass. "You shouldn't be here." I lowered Eva gently. "I had to find you," I said. "You disappeared without a word." She shook her head, staring past me instead of at me. "Because staying was hurting you. Because the longer I was in your house, the more the world tore you apart. Her hands trembled as she clasped them together. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what I asked, from kindness. Her throat tightened, from losing everything she said. Your reputation, your board, your stability. I stepped closer. She stepped back. She wouldn't even meet my eyes. Sienna, I said softer this time. My career was not collapsing because of you. The media twisted a story that never belonged to them. That's not your fault. But you paid for it, she whispered. Your son paid for it. I shook my head. Noah was worried because you left, not because of headlines. He kept asking where Mia went. At the sound of her daughter's name, her breath caught. She blinked fast, fighting tears she didn't want anyone to see. Please, I said at least look at me. She didn't. She stood perfectly still, rigid as stone, as if meeting my eyes would shatter what little resolve she had left. The staff member quietly stepped away, giving us space. I moved closer until only a foot separated us. Why did you really leave? Her lip trembled. Because I don't belong in your world, she whispered. I walk into rooms where people assume the worst. I work jobs no one respects. I raise my daughter in places you'd never let your son near. I live a life built on holding myself together while everything around me falls apart. She finally looked at me then, but only for a second. Long enough for me to see the exhaustion, the shame she never should have carried. You are a good man, she said, trembling. And good men don't deserve to be dragged down by someone like me. Someone like you, I repeated. Sienna, you fought through things most people wouldn't survive. You kept your daughter safe. You worked until you fainted trying to support her. How can you not see the strength in that? Strength doesn't matter, she whispered. The world sees me as a burden. I don't, I said. I've never once seen you that way. She looked to the side again. Maybe someday you will. That hit harder than any accusation. Is that what you think I asked? That I would wake up one day and decide you were too inconvenient to care about? Her silence was answer enough. I exhaled slowly. Sienna, the only thing that hurt me was losing you. She flinched. You didn't lose me. I removed myself. Why? Because I thought it was the only way to protect you, she said with a broken honesty that tore at something deep inside me. Eva tugged gently at her mother's hand. Mommy, she said softly. Can we go with him? Sienna's face crumpled for a moment, just long enough for truth to slip into the cracks. She loved me. She trusted me. She wanted safety. But she did not believe she deserved any of it. I knelt beside Eva and whispered, I'm not here to take you away. I'm here to make sure you and your mom are safe and supported. Always. When I rose, Sienna's eyes were red. I cannot go back with you, she said, voice shaking. I don't want to hurt your life any more than I already have. I nodded slowly, letting the truth settle. Then I'll meet you here, I said. I'll meet you wherever you are. I'm not leaving. She drew in a sharp breath, stunned, as if no one had ever chosen her without conditions. Eva pressed her face into my jacket, and Sienna finally whispered the words that cut deeper than anything she had said so far. I'm scared, Ethan. I don't know how to let someone stay. I stepped closer gently enough not to make her retreat. Then let me prove I won't leave. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She didn't speak. But she also didn't turn her back. Sometimes silence is the first step toward hope. Sometimes looking away is the only way a wounded person knows how to stay near. And sometimes finding someone is not enough. You have to stay long enough for them to look up again. I never understood what it meant to survive until I heard Sienna describe the year that nearly broke her. We were sitting in the guest house kitchen late at night, both of us too exhausted to sleep, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence, as she wrapped her hands around a cup of tea that had already gone cold. She did not cry. She did not dramatize. She simply told the truth in the quiet, steady voice of someone who had lived through so much that even pain had learned to sit down and behave. She told me how she had worked 3 jobs at once, waking up before dawn to clean offices downtown, running across the city for her restaurant shift, and doing late-night data entry after putting her daughter to sleep. She said it as if it were normal because for her it had been. She told me how her landlord changed the locks after she missed rent by 48 hours, even though she had already paid most of it. She told me how she carried her daughter 2 miles in the rain that night because she had no bus fare left and no one to call. She told me how employers quietly took advantage of her because she never complained, and how she let them because she could not risk losing even one paycheck. She told me about the emergency room bill she had been paying off $10 at a time months before the night I found her collapsed in the alley. Every detail tightened something inside my chest until I felt the weight of it like a hand pressing down. I had built an entire company around efficiency, performance, and hard numbers, yet none of my spreadsheets had ever shown me the price someone like her paid, so my world could run smoothly. I had never seen how policies that looked clean on paper created chaos in real lives. She was not a case study. She was not a news headline. She was a woman who had fought every single day with no safety net, no partner, and no margin for error, yet she still found ways to keep her daughter safe, fed, and loved. Listening to her changed something in me I did not know needed to change. I had walked into that alley thinking I was saving her, but she was the one holding up a mirror to everything I had ignored for too long. When she finished talking, she apologized as if telling me the truth was a burden. I shook my head and told her she never had to apologize for surviving. She looked at me like she wanted to believe it but could not. I went to work the next morning with a different heart and a different mind. Instead of delegating, I met directly with employees who had been affected by the same broken systems. I asked questions. I listened. I tore apart policies that had been in place long before I became CEO and realized they had been designed to protect the company, not the people who kept it alive. I appointed a task force to rebuild our worker support programs and doubled emergency funds for part-time employees. I overturned payment delays that hurt families living paycheck to paycheck. I increased parental benefits, childcare stipends, and healthcare assistance. I shut down departments that had been run by managers who had quietly punished vulnerable workers for years. Every decision felt like a piece of her story being rewritten. But when I tried to tell Sienna about the changes, she stiffened and shook her head. She asked me not to use her life as inspiration. She said it gently, almost apologetically. She did not want to be anyone's charity case. She did not want her pain to be turned into a corporate redemption arc. I told her I was not doing it for publicity, and she looked at me with heartbreaking honesty. That is what everyone says before they are. Hearing that hit me harder than any scandal ever had. I realized how many people had made promises to her that meant nothing. I was determined not to be another one. So I told her I would not share her story, not one detail, not with the board, not with the press, not even with my own mother. All she wanted was privacy and a chance to breathe. She deserved both. As the days passed, I watched her try to rebuild herself. Some mornings, she woke up strong and hopeful. Some mornings, she stared into her coffee, like she was trying to convince her reflection she could make it one more day. Emotional undulation became the rhythm of her life. Hope up, fear down, courage up, exhaustion down. But she kept going. The strength it took humbled me. Watching her endure more than any scandal ever could made every business crisis I had faced feel small and hollow. It also forced me to confront something I had been trying to ignore. I wanted to protect her. Not because she was fragile, but because she had carried so much alone for so long that I wanted for the first time in years to share the weight of someone else's world. The night I finally told her that, she looked at me with eyes that had learned not to trust too easily. She whispered the fear that lived beneath every breath she took. I cannot afford to need anyone. I understood, but I also knew this truth with absolute clarity. She had lived through every kind of hardship without breaking. If she let herself fall now, it would not be because she was weak. It would be because she finally felt safe enough to rest. And if she did, I wanted to be the person who caught her. Close! I realized then that she had not asked for rescue. She had only ever asked for a place where she no longer had to drown. The morning the story broke, I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant burst into the room without knocking her face pale, her phone shaking in her hand. She whispered that the media had published a photo of me carrying Mia out of the hospital the night I found Sienna. The picture was everywhere, splashed across headlines suggesting secret families, secret affairs, a CEO hiding a double life. The narrative was outrageous, irresponsible, but it spread faster than any truth could. I felt the room tilt slightly, not from fear of scandal, but from fear of what it would do to Sienna. She had spent her life judged, underestimated, and now she would be dissected publicly because of me. Within an hour, the board called an emergency meeting demanding an explanation. I stood in a sleek conference room under harsh fluorescent lights while a dozen people who had never known struggle lectured me about optics liabilities, shareholder trust. One of them said the words that snapped something in me. Distance yourself from this woman or step down. Not once did anyone say her name. Not once did anyone care that she was a mother who had almost collapsed from exhaustion. They spoke about her like she was a problem instead of a person. I walked out before the meeting ended. For the first time in my life, I did not care about the company more than my own conscience. Outside the building, a crowd of reporters had already gathered. Cameras flashed like lightning microphones shoved inches from my throat. Questions hurled over one another until they blended into noise. I should have left, but then I saw something that made my heart drop. Across the street, standing half hidden by a bus stop, was Sienna. Her hair was pulled back in a messy braid, her coat too thin for the cold, Mia pressed tightly against her hip. Her eyes were wide with panic as she watched the chaos unfold. She had come to return the guest house keys. She had come to step quietly out of my life. Instead, she found herself watching the world accuse her of things she did not do. She turned to leave, but Mia twisted in her arms, spotted me, and called out my name with innocent joy. The sound cut through the noise. I walked straight toward them, ignoring every camera. When I reached her, Sienna's voice trembled. I swear I didn't tell anyone. I swear I never wanted this attention. I know I said. But she shook her head harder. They will ruin you. They already are. You need to stay away from us. Her words came out like a final apology. I tightened my jaw because I refused to let fear speak for us. Come with me, please, not to hide, but to tell the truth. She hesitated, torn between survival instinct and the aching wish to be believed. Finally, she nodded. I lifted Mia gently from her arms, and together we walked back toward the cameras. Reporters erupted around us. It felt like standing in the center of a storm that had no mercy. I raised a hand for silence. When the crowd settled, I spoke clearly, deliberately, because I wanted every single person in the country to hear me without misunderstanding. This woman is not my scandal. She is not my secret. She is someone who worked herself to the point of collapse because life gave her no safety net. The only disgrace here is how many people let that happen without caring. A reporter shouted, asking if Mia was my child. I shook my head. Biology is not the only way to be responsible for someone. I found them on a night they had nowhere else to turn. I did what any decent human being should do. Another reporter asked if I had feelings for Sienna. The world seemed to hold its breath. I looked at her, her cheeks burning with fear and shame. She had never deserved, and I knew I would not lie to protect a version of myself the public preferred. I said I care about them. I will continue to care about them. My responsibility is not to image, but to people. The noise that followed was chaotic disbelief mixed with curiosity, outrage mixed with something strangely hopeful. I saw Sienna's hand shaking at her side. She whispered that I should not have said that. You just made everything worse for yourself. Maybe, I said, but better for you, and I meant it. The board issued a statement within an hour distancing themselves from me. Investors threatened to pull out. Analysts predicted the company would crumble under the weight of my moral decision. But that afternoon, when I returned to the guest house, Noah ran to me with wide, terrified eyes, asking if Mia was gone forever. When I told him no, his relief nearly knocked me to my knees. That was when I understood something with absolute clarity. The world could misunderstand me. The board could fire me. The media could twist me into whatever villain made them money. but the two children laughing in the next room and the woman folding their clothes with trembling hands, those were the people who mattered. That evening, I issued my final message to the press. A simple sentence. I choose them, and I always will. Close. I did not know what consequences were waiting for me, but for the first time in years, I felt my life aligning with my values instead of my fears. The weeks after the press conference felt strangely quiet, as if the world had taken a breath after shouting for too long. I stepped back from the company temporarily while the board fought over whether I should remain CEO, a battle I no longer had the energy to wage. Instead, I focused on something far more immediate and far more important, keeping Sienna and Mia safe, keeping Noah's world steady. I set them up in a company-supported apartment close to mine, a modest place with soft yellow walls and a balcony that overlooked the park. It was not a luxury penthouse, and I intended it that way. I had learned enough to understand she needed space where she did not feel indebted or overwhelmed. Sienna argued, of course. She always argued when she felt undeserving. You cannot keep helping me, Ethan. I am not your responsibility. You are not my burden either, I told her. Survival is not meant to be done alone. She lowered her eyes at that, and the conversation ended with no winner, yet no loss either. The shift from strangers to something like family happened slowly, almost accidentally. On the first Monday morning at the new apartment, I arrived to pick up Noah and found Mia and him sitting on the floor, surrounded by cereal pieces and crayons. Noah proudly explained that Mia had tried to pour her own breakfast and he had offered artistic direction. Sienna stood in the kitchen looking exhausted but laughing through her hand. Sorry, she said. We are chaotic this morning. I shook my head. Looks like joy to me. She blinked as if the word was too generous for her life. That afternoon, I came back from a meeting to find her teaching Noah how to braid hair using a stuffed giraffe as a model. The next day, Mia climbed into my lap without hesitation and fell asleep while I was reading a report. These moments strung together like beads, ordinary and imperfect, and unexpectedly healing. Emotional undulation lived in every day. One morning when Sienna managed to secure part-time work in our community outreach division. She cried when she signed the offer letter not from sadness, but from the shock of being chosen for her mind rather than her desperation. That same night, down, when she panicked over childcare and said maybe she should decline because she did not want to inconvenience anyone. I sat beside her on the couch watching her twist her fingers. You deserve opportunity, I said quietly. Not just survival. She swallowed hard. I do not know how to live with good things, Ethan. I am terrified I will break them. Maybe you will, I said gently. But maybe they will heal you too. On weekends, we would gather at the park where the kids raced down slides, their laughter echoing through cold, crisp air. One afternoon, Sienna sat beside me on a bench watching our children chase a pigeon with hysterical joy. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and whispered, They look like siblings already. They act like it too, I said. She smiled in that small, hesitant way she did when happiness surprised her. Another UP. But the next day, a down arrived quietly. She came to my office with swollen eyes saying someone at her new job recognized her from the articles and asked whether she was using me for financial gain. She said it hurt more than she expected. I told her sincerely that dignity is often invisible to those who have never had to fight for it. She nodded, letting the words settle into the bruised part of her heart. Our nights became softer. Sometimes I cooked dinner while she washed dishes, humming under her breath. Other times she read bedtime stories while I pretended not to fall asleep sitting up. The children adopted rituals of their own. Mia demanded goodnight hugs from Noah. Noah insisted he could only sleep if Mia whispered her silly secret word into his ear. I still do not know what that word is, but it works every time. And slowly, Sienna stopped apologizing for every breath she took. One evening, as I dropped them off, she lingered at the doorway. The porch light cast a warm circle around her, and the children giggled inside the apartment. She looked up at me with a softness I had not seen before. Ethan, she said, I do not know what this is, what we are, but I am not scared of it tonight. Her voice cracked slightly. For the first time, she allowed hope to sound like possibility instead of danger. We were not officially anything, and yet we were everything that mattered, a small family learning how to hold itself together with tenderness instead of fear. The biggest shift came after a dinner at my place. Noah spilled water everywhere Mia tried to feed me carrots, and Sienna laughed so hard she doubled over. It was messy and loud and real. After the kids fell asleep on the couch, she stood beside me watching them breathe. "They look safe," she whispered, almost to herself. "You helped make them safe," I replied. She turned toward me as though the words carried a weight she was not prepared for. "Ethan," she murmured, "I do not know if I am ready for more." "You do not have to be," I said softly. "We are not building a romance. We are building trust. And trust takes time." She exhaled like she had been holding her breath for years. That night when she left, she paused in the hallway, pressed her hand gently to my chest, and said, "Thank you for choosing us." My heart tightened in a painful and beautiful way because the truth was, I was not choosing them out of obligation. I was choosing them because life finally made sense when they were in it, close. The three of us were not perfect, but we were learning step by step to be a family. It happened quietly without warning, the way important things sometimes break, not with a crash, but with a sigh. One Wednesday morning, I arrived at the apartment to take the kids to the park and found the door slightly open. Inside the living room, toys were lined up neatly, the way Mia arranged them only when she was nervous. Noah's sweater, usually draped carelessly over the couch, was folded with careful precision. Something was wrong. I called out for Sienna, but only silence answered. My chest tightened. The children sat stiffly at the kitchen table. Mia clutched her bunny with both hands, and Noah kept his eyes down as if afraid to speak. Mia finally whispered, "Mommy said we have to be brave today." That sentence alone felt like a punch. I knelt beside her. "What does that mean, sweetheart?" She looked away. "Mommy said she was sorry she is always messing up your life. She made us pancakes and then she cried in the bathroom. She told us we are going someplace safe." My breath stalled. Safe. That word had the metallic taste of goodbye. I checked the bedrooms. Her clothes were gone. The tote bag she used for work was missing. On the counter sat an envelope with my name written in her careful handwriting. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Ethan, I cannot do this to you. You are losing your company piece by piece. People are questioning your judgment. I cannot be the reason everything collapses. I am grateful for you more than you know, but I am afraid of what I will cost you. Please take care of the kids today. They love you. Maybe too much. Sienna." No signature, no destination, just absence. I pressed my hand against the countertop to stay upright as the kids watched me with wide, frightened eyes. Mia whispered, "Is Mommy coming back?" I swallowed hard and lifted her gently into my arms. "I do not know yet, sweet girl, but we are going to find her together." I called every shelter, every clinic, every workplace she had ever mentioned. Nothing. She had vanished into the cracks of the city, the same cracks she had been slipping through long before I met her. By late afternoon, the kids were asleep in the back of the car while I drove aimlessly through the neighborhoods she once lived in. Rain threatened the horizon again, the sky darkening the same way it had the night we met. I kept replaying her words, afraid of what she would cost me. She never understood. She was not a cost. She was the part of my life that made everything else finally make sense. Just before sunset, my phone buzzed. A private number. When I answered, a familiar voice spoke hesitantly. "Ethan, this is Marisol from the outreach office. I think I know where she is." My pulse quickened. "Tell me." Marisol gave me the address of a women's transitional center about 20 minutes away. I thanked her and drove faster than I should have. When I reached the shelter, the building stood small and colorless against the dimming sky. A volunteer led me to the backyard, where families sometimes sat when they needed air. And there she was. Sienna sat alone on a wooden bench with her knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her hair was in a messy braid and her eyes were swollen. She looked up when she heard footsteps. When she saw me, she froze. I stood still, unsure whether to approach her gently or rush to her. She made the decision for me. "Do not, Ethan. Do not make this harder." Her voice cracked on the last word. You left without telling me where you were going, I said quietly. Why would you do that? She looked down at her hands. Because I watched your mother speak to you. I heard the board members talking about how reckless you are becoming. I saw the headlines calling you unfit to run your own company. And I knew every single one of them blamed me. I stepped closer. So you left my life to protect my reputation. She flinched. When you say it like that, it sounds foolish. It sounds heartbreaking, I corrected. She shook her head, tears spilling freely now. I cannot be the broken thing everyone thinks you are trying to fix. I cannot be the charity case in your perfect world. I sat beside her, slowly leaving space, but close enough for her to feel I was not going anywhere. Sienna, look at me. She hesitated, then lifted her eyes. I do not want perfection, I told her. I want the chaos. I want the noise. I want Noah teaching Mia bad jokes and you burning toast because you get distracted talking to them. I want the life we have been building. She covered her face with trembling hands. I do not know how to trust that Ethan. I do not know how to trust that someone stays because they want to and not because they feel obligated. I lowered my voice. I am not here because I feel required. I am here because without you and your daughter, my home feels empty again. The wind rustled the small garden, the faint hum of traffic filling the silence between us. Finally, she whispered, the kids are getting too attached. What if this does not work and they get hurt? Then we teach them that hurt does not end a family. I said, it strengthens one. She let out a quiet sob. Ethan, I am terrified. So am I admitted. But love has room for fear. She turned slowly toward me, the way someone inches back toward warmth after living too long in cold places. I held out my hand, not touching her, just offering. She stared at it for what felt like a lifetime. Then, with a shuddering breath, she placed her hand in mine. I caught it gently, as if afraid she might disappear again. I whispered, I lost you once. I refuse to lose you again. She leaned forward, forehead resting against my shoulder, her tears soaking my shirt. And for the first time since she walked away, she let herself be held. 1 year later, the world felt different, not because life had become easier, but because we had become stronger together. The winter sun spilled softly across the small backyard of the home. We now shared a place that once echoed with silence, but now overflowed with laughter, shouts, clattering dishes, and the unfiltered joy of 2 children rebuilding their futures. Mia chased Noah through the grass, wearing a pink jacket that barely contained her energy, while our dog, a gentle rescue mutt named Maple, bounded behind them in crooked circles. I stood on the porch with a mug of coffee watching the chaos with a smile as Sienna stepped out beside me, adjusting her sweater while brushing a loose curl behind her ear. She rested her elbow against mine. You look proud, she said. I am, I replied. I am proud of them, proud of you, proud of the life we almost never got to have. She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder, and for a moment we stood in quiet gratitude. A year ago, she had been sitting alone in a shelter, clutching her daughter, terrified to breathe too loudly. Now she was here beside me, warm, safe, and finally believing she deserved the space she occupied. Inside the house, photographs lined the hallway. Not posed studio photos, but candid snapshots of mornings, messy hair, pancakes burnt on the edges, children sleeping on the couch after movie night, the 4 of us at the park building, lopsided snowmen. Each picture was a reminder that healing is not loud or dramatic. It is steady. It is earned. It is chosen daily. That morning we were preparing for something important, a luncheon where our foundation, the one we created together, would celebrate its first anniversary. The Empower Together initiative had grown faster than anyone predicted. What began as support for single mothers had expanded into job training, childcare grants, mental health counseling, and emergency housing. Sienna had taken the role of program director, though she still hesitated to call herself that. She said director sounds like someone who has her whole life together. I had replied gently, then it fits you perfectly. At 11, we arrived at the event hall, a renovated community center filled with balloons, coffee stations, and rows of folding chairs. Volunteers I recognized from earlier hardships now thrived as staff mentors and coordinators. They greeted Sienna as if she were a sister, a leader, someone who understood their battles not from a distance, but from the trenches. "You made this possible," I whispered to her as we walked in. She squeezed my hand. "No, we did this." And then she added with that shy smile that still hit me in the chest every time they saved me as much as we saved them. As the program began, the room filled quickly with families, mothers with strollers, fathers learning to parent alone, grandparents trying their best, and dozens of children running around without a care in the world. When the ceremony started, I took the stage, but my eyes found Sienna in the crowd. She held Mia on her lap, and beside her, Noah sat proudly wearing a tie that was slightly crooked. As I began to speak, I felt emotion tighten my throat. A year ago, I said I met two people who changed my life in a way I never expected. I thought I was helping them, but the truth is, they helped me remember who I wanted to be. They gave me purpose. They gave me a family. The audience went quiet in the warm, attentive way people listen when the words come from the heart. Today is not about charity. It is about dignity. It is about making sure no one walks alone in a world that can be unforgiving. It is about giving families a chance to breathe again. When the applause rose, I watched as Mia tugged on Sienna's sleeve, whispering something. Sienna nodded and stood with her walking toward the stage. I stepped back as they joined me. Mia held a small paper heart decorated with stickers and glitter. She lifted it proudly. "This is for all the mommies and daddies who are tired," she announced. Laughter rippled across the room, soft, affectionate. Then she turned to me and without hesitation wrapped her arms around my waist. "Daddy, we did it." The word daddy landed gently but deeply, and I felt something inside me loosen, a final piece of grief lifting at last. I kissed the top of her head. "Yes, sweetheart, we did." After the event, we walked as a family through the snowy streets. Children's footprints trailed behind us, and the city lights shimmered against the pale afternoon sky. Sienna slipped her hand into mine. "Do you ever think about how close we came to missing this?" she asked. "Every day," I said. She stopped me, turning to face me fully, her eyes bright with gratitude. "Thank you for not giving up on me, Ethan. Thank you for letting me stay." "You never needed permission," I told her. "You only needed a place where you were wanted, and you always were." As we walked home, Mia and Noah raced ahead, leaving Sienna and me behind on the sidewalk. She stepped in front of me, smiling in the soft falling snow. "Do you realize," she said teasingly, "that our kids are building a snow fort without us?" I laughed. "Then we better catch up." She took my hand again, but this time she pulled me closer, linking her arm through mine. In that simple gesture, I felt everything this year had built: trust, tenderness, forgiveness, and the quiet certainty that love had found its place between us. As we reached the porch, the lights switched on automatically, casting a warm glow over the entrance. The kids ran inside, laughing. Sienna stepped through the doorway and turned back to me, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Remember when I whispered, 'Mommy cannot go,'" she said softly. I nodded. She smiled wider. "Now she can." She took my hand and guided me into the house, closing the door behind us with a gentle click. For the first time in years, I felt whole. A family not formed by luck or ease, but by courage. Small moments, steady effort, and the willingness to stay. And in that glowing doorway, I realized something with complete certainty. We had not escaped our past. We had transformed it. We became the family none of us thought we would ever have. If this story touched something in you today, even just for a moment, I want you to stay with me here for a little longer. Stories like these are not just about love or heartbreak or second chances. They remind us of the quiet battles people fight behind closed doors, the way a single act of kindness can change the entire course of a life, the way broken families can become whole again when someone chooses compassion over convenience. If you felt that warmth in your chest when Ethan lifted that exhausted mother from the alley, or when Mia whispered "Daddy" for the first time, or when a man who was once shattered by grief learned how to hope again, then you already understand why we tell stories like this. Because somewhere out there, someone is living a moment just like theirs. Someone is trying to keep the lights on. Someone is working 2 jobs. Someone is raising a child alone. Someone is carrying guilt that does not belong to them, and someone is waiting for a reason to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. And maybe, just maybe, stories like this give them that reason. I know you could have spent your time anywhere else, but the fact that you stayed until the very last words means something. It means you still believe in kindness. You still believe people can change. You still believe love can be rebuilt even after loss. And if you believe in those things, then you belong here with us. We share stories every week about ordinary people who find extraordinary strength, about families made not by perfection but by courage and forgiveness, about small human moments that carry more truth than any headline ever will. And if you let them, these stories will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. So before you go, I want to ask you something. If today's story made you feel a little less alone, if it reminded you of someone you once loved or someone you miss, if it gave you a reason to breathe deeper or cry softly or smile at something you forgot you were capable of feeling, then please do not leave without hitting that like button. It tells the algorithm that moments like these matter. It tells the world that compassion has value. It tells creators like us to keep going. And if you have not already subscribed to the channel so you never miss the next story that might speak directly to your heart. Because the truth is, sometimes one story is all it takes to shift the direction of a life. If you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who is tired or hurting or trying to rebuild after loss, share this video with them. You never know how deeply it might touch them, and I would love to hear your voice in the comments. Tell me which moment moved you most. Was it the little girl in the rain, the mother who finally let herself rest, the widowed father learning how to hope again? Or was it something quieter, something that reminded you of your own journey? Whatever it was, your story matters too, and maybe next time yours will be the one we tell. Thank you for being here. Thank you for caring. Thank you for choosing stories that lift people rather than break them. Until the next chapter, remember this. The smallest kindness can save a life. The gentlest words can heal a heart, and no one, absolutely, no one deserves to walk through their darkest night alone. I will see you in the next story.